Hi guys, in this episode of Shri series, we're going to be introducing index laws, alright? So we're going to be going through what index laws are, what are the key laws that you need to apply in this topic, and then in the next set of videos, we're going to be applying these questions, alright? So when you look at index or indices for that matter, all right, we're looking at what we refer to as base and power. All right, now I'll just give you a simple example. Suppose you've got 2 to the power 3. All right, so we know very well that that 2 is called your base. All right, why? And I tend to tell students that the reason why it's called base is it's on the ground. It's like how you've got a house base. All right, you've got everything fitted at ground level, so it's base. So number 2, it's down there. All right, and 3 becomes your power. All right, so when you're looking at index laws, you got to be familiar with what the word power and base mean. All right, another example is, let's say for instance, a to the power n. We know very well a becomes my base and n becomes my power. All right, one of the things you'll understand with index laws is it's not just about numbers like 2 to the power 3. In this case, sometimes you'll also be dealing with letters like a to the power n, or in some occasions you might have to be dealing with a power which has a number or a letter. All right, so for example, you might say 3 to the power n, or even n to the power 3. All right, so please remember that when you're talking about index laws, you have to deal with numbers and letters. All right, so with that in mind, we've now identified what a base is and we've identified what a power is. Let's look at the first law of indices, or index law number 1. All right, so what I'll do is I'm going to introduce you the laws of indices, and I would say, for example, let's look at index law number 1. All right, so what does index law number 1 tell you? All right, now we sometimes refer to this as the multiplication rule or the addition rule. All right, so I'll just give you a simple example. Suppose you've got a to the power m times a to the power n. What does that simplify to? All right, now provided that you've got a multiplication sign and the bases are the same, that now becomes a to the power m plus n. All right, so sometimes we refer to this as the addition law. All right, the reason why we call that the addition law is because when you've got numbers multiplied, or should I say bases multiplied, all you simply need to do is you're adding the powers. All right, so when you've got a to the power m times a to the power n, that's actually equal to a to the power m plus n. Now this law works well if and only if you've got the bases same and you've got a multiplication sign. I've seen students make mistakes by wrongly writing the rule like this, by saying a to the power m plus a to the power n is the same as a to the power m plus n. Please remember that is not the case. All right, you need to get the plus out and replace it with a times. All right, so please don't misinterpret your index laws, because a lot of students make these mistakes, and that will cost you marks because you're not going to get the answer right. Okay, so the first law is the addition law, and what we simply did was a to the power m times a to the power n is a to the power m plus n. All right, so let's look at a simple example. Suppose you've got a to the power 3 times a to the power 2. All you're going to do is just add your power, a plus a to the power 3 plus 2, and that is a to the power 5. All right, that's a simple example of addition laws. All right, so all we simply did was a to the power 3 times a to the power 2. We retained that a and we simply added the powers, and that became a to the power 5. All right, let me give you another simple example. Suppose you've got, say, 2 to the power, let me use a different color so you use a bit of distinction. 2 to the power 3 times, let's say, 2 to the power 4. That now becomes 2 to the power 3 plus 4, and that becomes 2 to the power 7. All right. So all we've done is we've asked ourselves, is the base the same, which is 2? Yes, it is. Are we timesing them? Yes. So therefore, you add your power. So that is index law number 1. All right. Let me look at other questions as well, because you got to remember that when you're looking at powers, it doesn't have to be positive powers like the examples I've showed. You could also use negative powers. So let me give you a simple example. So for instance, you've got, let's say, a to the power negative 3 times a to the power negative 4. All right, that becomes a to the power negative 3 plus negative 4. All right, so you got to be very careful, because sometimes you might forget to add the plus because you've got the negative powers. All right, just remember, you've got to be careful with also ensuring that you've put the numbers, or should I say negative 4, in brackets. Okay, and if you were to simplify that, that becomes a to the power negative 3 minus 4, and that is a to the power negative 7. All right, so you must remember that powers need not necessarily be applicable to positive numbers. You also have negative numbers. All right, so that is how we work with index laws. So simple tip, make sure that the powers are the same and you're multiplying, and then you add your powers, you will get your answer. All right, so let's look at index law number 2. All right, now this, I think by now you kind of understand where we're heading to, because we had the multiplication of powers, or the multiplication of numbers, and what we did was we added the powers. Now let's look at index law number 2. All right, so what happens with index law number 2? We refer to this as subtraction law. Now some textbooks call it the law of division, some textbooks say the law of subtraction. All right, but when you see me explain the law, you'll understand how you want to interpret it. All right, so we call it the subtraction or the division law. So let me give you a simple illustration. Suppose you've got a to the power m divided by a to the power n. All right, now I just want to give you a comparison analysis here, or comparison example. Suppose you've got a to the power m times a to the power n. You know by now a to the power m times a to the power n is actually a to the power m plus n. We're adding your powers when you've got multiplication. All right. In this situation here, you've got a to the power m divided by a to the power n. So what we've got is, instead of multiplication, we've got division. What do? You subtract your power. So that now becomes a to the power m minus n. So that's what the second law of indices state. Provided that you've got the same base, all right, and you're dividing it, all you simply need to do is subtract your powers. All right, so let's look at a simple example. Say a to the power 7 divided by a to the power 3. All right, are my bases the same? Yes, a, and we're dividing, so that now becomes, a to the power 7 minus 3, which is a to the power 4. All right, a to the power 4, because we are subtracting the powers. All right, another simple example. So that's example 1. Let's look at example 2. There's a bit more space here so we can utilize that. Say, for instance, you've got, let's say, 3 to the power 7 divided by 3 to the power 2. That becomes 3 to the power 7 minus 2, which is 3 to the power 5. All right, so like I said, when you're dealing with indices, it not necessarily applies to letters. You can also have numbers. All right, so what we've done with example 2, 3 to the power 7 divided by 3 to the power 2, what we did was we retained the base, which is 3, and subtracted the powers to get 3 to the power 5. All right, let's look at another example of index law number 2. So in that way, we have some practice. So the more questions we practice, the better students have confidence. All right, so let's look at a situation where we've got negative power. All right, just like how we applied the addition law, or index law number 1, where we had negative powers, we can also use it here in index law number 2. So let's say, for instance, you've got m to the power negative 7 divided by m to the power negative 3. All right, so what do we do in this situation? We're going to be subtracting the powers. And how's that going to work out? So that's m to the power negative 7 minus negative 3. All right, so you've got to be a little bit careful, because sometimes students forget to put the extra minus because they think they're already minusing because of the law. But you've got to remember that the first minus is because you're subtracting the power, and then you've got the negative 3 there because that's the power which we're using from here. All right, so I like students to develop the habit of putting the second number, which is negative 3, in brackets, just to show you that that negative 3 is actually the power from here. All right, so what does that now become? So that's m negative 7 plus 3, because when you got two negatives together, that becomes a positive, and therefore my answer becomes m to the power negative 4. All right, so you can see that you can also get negative powers. All right, so this is how we work through index law number 1. All right, and also index law number 2. In the next set of videos, we're going to be talking about index law number 3, 4, and 5. And then what we'll also do is we'll be given an opportunity to solve complex index law questions where you need to apply all 5 laws in one question. All right, thanks for listening, guys. Bye now.